Morning. This is Daphne Atkinson from GED Testing Service, and I'd like to welcome you to the August edition of Tuesdays for Teachers. Today, we have something really special planned for you. You have been telling us for the last several years about the RLA interface. Well, we've got great news for you. We're going to be updating and changing that interface beginning after the first of the year. So today, we've invited Ann Evers from Assessment Services to walk you through some of those changes. And I think that by the end of the webinar, you'll agree that these are most welcome changes. So I also want to make sure that I say that Susan Pittman is also on the line with us today. And after the presentation, we will take questions, and hopefully you'll have a chance to ask us the burning questions that you have about the RLA constructive response. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the webinar over to our guest speaker, Ann Evers. Ann?
Thanks, Daphne. Welcome, everybody, and I guess good morning or good afternoon. I thought good afternoon. As Daphne says, I'm on the Assessment Services team. I'm the Test Development Manager, and over the past several years, I've been going out and doing research with several colleagues that go right over the country. One is also here in DC with me, Cynthia Parshall, and the other one is Brittany Johnson over in California. So I just wanted to introduce them as well because they have all participated and helped along the way with both of these research projects. So today I'm going to share some of the research that we did on the RLA, the extended response, and share the findings and the outcomes that you will all be seeing very shortly. As well, I'll share the new project or the ongoing project of the score report with you. I'll show you what we found up till now and share some new prototypes and where we're going in the future. So we'll start with the extended response. As I said, share some of the findings and how we got there, and then share with you the potential test improvements. So why did we go out and start investigating the extended response in the first place? And as Daphne suggested at the beginning, it was because we were listening to you. Since we've launched the test, we have heard from you that your students are still not excelling at the task. And so this could be, there's many questions put out there. Was it not understanding the task itself, not understanding the scoring criteria, or perhaps the terminology and the way the prompt was written with analysis and evaluation and what these words were meaning exactly. So we started to go in 2015. We put together a little pilot test in Maryland, Virginia, and DC at ABEs. I went out and we did some cognitive labs to try to start exploring what, in fact, is going on. And we looked at a sample of different students, some who had taken the RLA and had passed, or they took the RLA and they had failed, or they hadn't taken the test yet, to get a good view of all of our participants. Our pilot study research questions we started off with, obviously, we wanted to understand if they understand the task, the prompt. What is going on with this prompt? How are they understanding it? And then also the computer interface, changing from paper-based to computer-based. How are they interacting with not only the size of the box and writing in the box, but also things that we supply on the interface, such as the answer guides. And what are they recognizing with the answer guide, what it is? Are they opening it? Do they understand? Or are they reading it? And then the tabs at the top of the page, we wanted to see if they were successfully navigating and using these tabs and how they were interacting with these tabs. Finally, how are they preparing for the test? We've never really understood or known or asked that question on a face-to-face College Lab. So it was a good opportunity to just ask, do you have an account? Do you use the resources we provide for you, the tutorial, the free practice test, so you prepare before the test, you get to the actual interface of the test. So in general, we were pretty happy to find that they do know not to write about their opinion anymore. That's gotten across loud and clear. They also know that they need to use evidence from the passages in their writing, but they really don't understand what the task was, what they need to do. When we would ask them specifically, what does analyze mean within the prompt, they would simply say, I guess, to read the two passages. And then I think our big aha moment at this stage was that while they know that they need to use evidence from the passages, they don't do the seemingly next step. They don't go and explain why that evidence that they chose is the best to support the stronger argument. And I'll come back to this in the rest of the presentation. They really are comfortable with computers. I know initially everyone was very worried, but what we saw and what we can learn from what we saw, they're very comfortable with the keyboard, they're very comfortable with typing, but truly that size of the box subtly informed them how much we expected them to write. And then finally, a lack of preparedness. The tutorial, this speaks directly to, on the screen there's a highlighter, and nobody saw the highlighter, nobody used the highlighter. When I would go and I would show them how to use the highlighter, because it's a tricky one, they would say, oh, that's so useful. I could have used that. And I'd say, well, did you use the tutorial? No, what's the tutorial? So I would show them the tutorial. Same would be with the free practice test, would be really helpful. The answer guidelines. Nobody chose the answer guidelines. Not that they didn't always see it, they saw it. But one specific woman will always stand out in my mind, where I asked her, did you see the answer guidelines? She goes, oh yeah. And I said, what do you think is in there? And she goes, I don't know, the answers? And I said, oh my gosh, I would totally cheat and I would try and find the answers. I would open that up. And I said, so why didn't you? If you really thought that was maybe the answers in there. And she said, I don't want to waste time. I don't want to open up something and I don't want to read extra stuff. Because when I opened it up and I showed her, she thought, oh, this is really useful. And she said, but I wouldn't have read all of that as I was going through the task. The note boards, everyone is supplied 3 blank note boards in the testing center so that they can prepare their answers. We didn't see one student use them or anything, but we know that preparing to write the center response is important. So how could we help them with this? So we set out again with a new research project. Same questions, really, but we did some upfront material building instead and put together this instructional presentation. I know you all have access to this presentation here. You can click on the YouTube video. You'll hear my voice again. I'm sorry for that. But it's a PowerPoint that we put together with a little preamble, 3 minutes, of expectations, what they're going to see, what they need to do, how to use quotations, and how long, how much to write. Very simple. And then we also went out with a reformatted box of the external response. We made it larger. And the prompt, we reworded the instructions to be more direct and use language or structure it so that they could maybe understand what analyze means. This time, we went out and we included self-study or non-ABE students, because we know that there's a large portion of students out there who don't go into an ABE, and they also need to be, we need to take them into account, of course. So after, the way that the process worked for this study was we would show them the instructional presentation, get their feedback, let them go on to the task. Then after they did the task, we would ask them some structured interview questions, and then I would hand them a printout of the PowerPoint instructional presentation with the narration and ask them to underline aha moments, or I didn't know that, or this is really good. From those kind of outcomes, it helped us and informed where we were going with our new format and instructions. So our findings. I don't know why this was so glaringly aha for us, but 99% of our students, and you know, are mobile users. They don't have a laptop, they don't have a desktop. They use that in their school if they come in. We had a lot of positive feedback about the instructional video. It was short, 3 minutes long. It was audio. And then also when they underline those aha moments, some of them were very, they took that home with them and they started to look at that. We found that they do use online tools. Yes, they use books, but they also, on their phone, they want to find some tools. So this tangentially has inspired the new study guide that we've created on GED.com. They need guided scaffolding. Besides us asking them interview questions, they're asking us questions too while we're out in the field. And they really want to know what's next. How can I get from here to there? They want to see more of a plan for them. So this tangentially is also represented and worked into the new personalized study guide and the score report that I'll show you later. There was a lot of positive outcomes to the size of the box. Not only did they say it was positive, like it was good, it was easy to work within, but it was also in the amount that they wrote. I hope you're sitting down. So in the small box, we were averaging about 175 words. It's not enough for us to score. Now with the resized box, we're going up to 500 to 600 words. That in and of itself is great. But what's more is when we looked at what they wrote, the actual quality of what they wrote, because now the revised instructions, they understood the task, was rich. We could actually start to see some of trait 1 coming out. All very, very positive. So that speaks to, we will start in 2015. By 2019, we're now going to release this new format for the ER. Initially, what you see immediately is a big box. I'll give you that one. But you also see a 50-50 split on the screen. Currently, we have a 60-40 split. Most of our items are 60-40 split. Here, now we've done a 50-50 split. That will allow for more area to write. We clearly wrote instructions so that they know that this is what they have to do. We started without instructions, and we ended up with the word instructions. To answer and help them understand scaffolding and guiding, yes, they aren't using the note boards. That could be helped. That would be great. But now we have first read, then plan, and then write. Remember that one bullet point I said that they're not taking it to the next level, and they're explaining why the evidence they chose from the passage supports the stronger argument. This was in the answer guidelines. So we brought it out. We put it right here so that they can, in wording that they would understand, that they have to now explain. They have to do a next step. And then this was also 4 to 7 paragraphs of 3 to 7 sentences each, was also in the answer guidelines. We brought it out. This was one of the biggest highlighted things in the instructional presentation. There's no word count there, but this is how much I need to write. And finally, not finally, but at the top, page 1 and page 2. Now, going forward, on every GED Ready, on every GED test, you're only going to see 2 tabs. The first page is going to be the instructions. These instructions, always. Page 2 is going to house the 2 passages. We went and did another study on the side where we were looking at how people were navigating with those tabs. And the test has been out since 2014, and when I would watch people, I gave them 2 tasks. I gave them the scrolling and the tabs. And the tabs, they had a really hard time trying to figure out where they were going. But the scrolling, they did with ease. Now, initially, we did not find that in our usability studies for the tutorial and everything. What we find now is probably because of the prolonged use or more use of using websites, scrolling has become a lot more common. And so we decided that they're not finding the tabs, let's do scrolling instead. Now, finally, you might see that there's bolding on here. It's not random bolding. The bolding is specific to facilitate and help skimmers, people who skim read. So read page 2 tab above. Read 2 texts, different views. Both writers argue their position correct. These words, the same words, are bolded in Spanish as well. So the same meaning comes across. So this is going to be on every GED Ready and GED test coming January 2019. Moving on to the score report. Score report is a multi-phase usability study. So if you've been around with us for as long as I have, you might remember the old 2002 test, and that was a paper-based test, and we could report out that a student passed or failed. That was our capability. Now, with a new computer-based test, we have more options to report out at a different level of depth. So what you're seeing in our current score report is what we put together back to launch in 2014 for how I can score higher and all of those skills, what my score means, better than a pass or a fail. We want to tell you a little bit more, but we told you a lot. And then my written answers for RLA. So now comes to 2017, and we're in the midst of the RLA and learning more about our test takers and how people are understanding the RLA task. And we start to think, well, how are students and teachers using and understanding the score report? Is it how we think people are using it as what we wanted, or can we now improve that as well? So we created a double-phased study. The first was to understand. We first needed to understand how students and educators are using the score report. So within context for the educators and a usability study for the students. Those are complete, and I'm going to share with you our objectives, our participants, the data collection methods that we used, and the findings. The findings that we have now have allowed us to build prototypes in phase 2. So this is the first ever prototype. I wonder what Ford's model car looked like for the prototype, but this is the first type. So it's not going to be the be-all and end-all, because we have 2 more steps in our phase to take this, what I'm going to show you, and go out and do a concept testing. Is this actually a good use and understand tool for what we heard? Then we will hear from our participants. We will make the changes. We'll go out again, make the changes, go out again. It's called iterative reviews and changes. Then once we don't have any sticking points with our participants, we'll do a usability study with both students and educators. So obviously we're looking into at least 2019. So what I'm sharing with you today, we're midway. immediately we found out that when we're talking as assessment services about the score report, it was more than just the score report that we had to investigate. The scope was large. So the dashboard, how do people, students and educators, enter to find the score report? What about the My Scores page and the Scores page? How do you, both participants use that? And then the scores and my test history. What is it, the most recent one that shows up, or is it only their highest score? And how do people use that page? So we started with the usability with the students. And so why is usability important? I think we all agree that our students and test takers have enough obstacles in their life that we don't want to have GED.com or a score report, which is supposed to be a helpful tool, have more obstacles in their way. So I'm sure you've all been on a website before where you click on something and you go to another tab and you can't find your way back, or you can't find something on the website. It's worded something strange. And if you are coming to find your score report and you have all these obstacles to try and find it, after a while you just give up and you almost take it personally, like, why is this, what am I doing wrong? And I don't want that to happen. So our research objectives with the students was to A, can they find it? Do they use it and understand it? Is it easy? But most important for me was, can they effectively use it as a tool to help them improve their score? If we have this capability to report out feedback where they can help them improve their score, are we doing that to the best of our ability? So for this study, again, it was in the DC area, Maryland and Virginia, and we wanted to see how students were looking at the score report, but they had different times of their journey. So if they hadn't taken a GED ready, so therefore they've never seen a score report, how are they acting with that and interacting and understanding what they're seeing for the first time? And then also if they had taken one or many GED readies, how were they interpreting the score report? We know that 99% of our students are mobile users, but yet there's a portion who go into the desktop version, and those two versions are different. So how is one better than the other? How can we make changes? And then again, it was a mix of self-study and ABE students. This time though, we got to use some fun technology, eye tracking. So that's my colleague there sitting at the monitor, the big monitor, and there's a track underneath the monitor there, which is actually capturing her eyes. So I'll talk about that in a second. This setup is how the researcher would sit at the laptop and the participant would sit at the monitor, and the researcher immediately sees, besides not looking over their shoulder and making them feel uncomfortable, immediately sees what they're doing on the screen. And this is all captured by video. But first you have to calibrate the person's eyes. So that's what's happening on the left-hand side. And after that, you could see their face on the right-hand side in the top left here under eye gaze plots. And we now have their eyes captured. And so we could see where they're looking on the screen as the researcher. This right side would be the researcher. And we could see exactly where they're looking. And as they sit on one particular plot and the circle grows, it means that they're sitting there just looking at that. And then we can prompt and ask extra questions about what's that about, tell me more about what you're doing there. So it's a very, very useful tool to really get at how they're using and understanding what they're seeing.
And this is Daphne. Can you go back to that slide? Is the size of the plot circle indicative of a gaze lingering on an item? Because I'm struck
Correct.
by the fact that the first place that it seems that the individual looked was at the scaled score, and then that drifts down.
That's exactly right, Daphne, because this not only shows us how long they were staring, but where did they enter the task. So when the score report opened up, yeah, they went straight to the scaled score. So this gives us a map as to where they're looking at first, where they end, and things like that too. Yeah, good point. The next one is doing on cell phones. And this particular app on our phone allows us to test remotely. So as I said at the start of this hour, my team is in DC and also over in California. And so having a remote device like this that allows us to be talking to people across the country and not have to be physically there is a really good, it gives us a lot more breadth of demographics to test with. So here you could see my finger is on my phone, and it's also being screencast on the laptop in front of me. So as a researcher, I don't have to sit there and look over your shoulder. I can see that on the researcher's laptop, and I can just ask you prompting questions. But what's more is I can actually see your facial expressions. You're at the bottom. That's my face down there on the left, because I had to hide the other person. But you could see their face, and if they start squinting or getting angry or something, then I can ask a question like, oh, I see your fingers on something. Can you tell me why you're having a hard time there? Next is the contextual inquiry. So what is a contextual inquiry? Well, we thought this would be best with educators, instead of just having them navigate around and tell us about what they're seeing, actually have them do a task of entering and finding a score report and then telling us what they're doing with it, how they would use that in their daily events. Again, we wanted to see what was their pattern of use. How did they find the score report? GED Manager, GED.com. And then, is the content meaningful for them to help them teach? For me, it was more about, is this a tool that's actually helping them guide their students? Because again, that is what we really want to help with. So I wanted to see that. So as I said, we used Validately for the mobile app at the top. We also used Validately for this study on desktops, but because it's remote, I could stay in DC, my colleague will be in California, and we'd be talking to people in Alaska, all the way down to Arizona. So this unique ability allowed us to see a really wide variety of educators in rural, in urban, in large, in small. What is their facilities? What are their limitations for them, for their daily work? This is a screencasting of what we would see when we gave them a task. Then they would go into the score report, and we would be able to not only video it, but we take notes right there. And we saw some different ways of getting there to the score report. GED.com, where they would look over the shoulder because they didn't have access to GED Manager or GED Manager. And also how some educators would take this information of how to score higher for their students and put them into spreadsheets that related other students in their classroom with the same skills that needed to be worked on, and how educators were really being very innovative and creative in taking it to another step, how they were using it in their classroom. So what did we learn? We learned that there's definitely usability problems for both students and educators. Students had a harder time than not trying to go back to where they came from and move around within not only the score report, but that scope of study, many different ways to enter the score report. Educators felt that some of the elements were frustrating to use and just never used them. We definitely found, which we thought, that the language that we use to describe the indicators and the skills need to become more simplistic while not losing their full meaning. So how to score higher It's not only for educators, but it's also for test takers, so it needs to be accessible to both. And the What My Score Means tab, nobody clicked on it. Nobody uses that. They go straight to how I score higher. How can I score higher? And when they did go to what my score means, many times we heard, okay, so there's this big long blurb at the top of what my score means, and then it's a list of all these skills that they still need to work on. No, those are the skills that you've got right, but it's not coming out that way. And then a missed opportunity that we could consider to have a direct link to the scoring tool in the extended response tab, so educators can have an immediate way to get the scoring tool and not have to dig through all of GED.com necessarily. It could be right there for them. Educators were talking to us about when they went through how to score higher, they would choose, say, a Kaplan book. And same is true for test takers. We choose like a Kaplan book, and you would see the list come out of all, in the study guide, of all of the different skills you have to work on. And then those skills may appear on multiple pages in the same unit. So there was a disconnect between multiple pages and the skills not being numerical and being very confusingly organized. It's not easy to navigate through, and in fact, many teachers were printing off the plan and then connecting it by paper for their students because it just wasn't spitting out the right order of things. That makes sense. I'll show you in a second what I mean. And then we have an opportunity to really help students learn and understand the score report with some encouraging messaging as well, so that many of them said, I don't really want to click on it. I'll see the score and if I passed or failed, because I don't really want to see all the other stuff that's there. It just doesn't make me feel very good. So maybe on our side, we could do some extra language around that to make them feel good with statistics or things. And then mentioning college ready or college ready plus credits, so that if they wanted to score higher, what are these things? Many of them don't know what they are. And then what does that mean for them? And if they wanted to go for that, then what could they do? So that's a missed opportunity. Here is an example of the first prototype. Let me emphasize first. So this is a GED Ready RLA. You can see we still have the same graph on the right for now. We have the entering intro language. Good job, Jim. You scored the yellow zone. Take away that whole what your score means tab and reduce it to simple language of what it means. And then underneath there, have a preamble of what the two bars, my personal study guide and my extended response, mean. What can I do? So if you were to click on my personal study guide, it would open up and it would give you basic information about if you want to score higher, you can choose your own study material. Currently, our study materials are all listed there, everything under the sun, your choice, and sometimes there's duplicates. So here, let's separate it into select a book. We heard a number of students who, they don't have a computer, they don't want to have an e-learning program for their phone, so they go to a library and they take out a book, and then sometimes their teachers will actually give them a printed out version of that book to study from as well. So say you wanted to have a select a book, then you would go to step 2 and you would see your personal study guide. This is what I was talking about that I may not have done such a good job of a second ago of describing. Here we flipped the driver of how this information is being described to everybody. Instead of having the skill driving where you can find it in the material, we have the material and what you're going to find, what you need to work on within that page or that unit. So it's numerical down down on the left-hand side. And then as in 1.2, summarize and inferences, you'll see that there's actually 3 skills that you need to work on, and they all come in 1.2 instead of how we have it currently. And this is the final slide. This is how we could propose changing the extended response based on what we found. So the new version of the prompt allows us to rewrite it as such. Your task was to analyze both passages, decide which argument has more convincing evidence, explain why the evidence supported your choice. I can't emphasize that last one enough. And then that we put out there, right front and center, how much they're expected to write. And then the watch a video here could be something like the instructional presentation that we created for the RLA project, because what we learned about that particular video gave instant effects to what they were writing. Then, of course, we would have read your response. This, again, is the GED Ready. This would not be on the GED test. The GED Ready would show what the student wrote. And then this is a new idea about having the student self-study or in an ABE evaluate their own response with a checklist. This checklist consists of 10 questions. The questions are more reflective, broken down into each trait in very simple language. But the idea would be that the person could go back and read their response and answer the questions accordingly. So they would be reflecting on their own writing. The feedback would be specific to what they actually answered within those questions. And then 8 instructional videos. Currently, I'm thinking of the ones of Alice who are on our website right now. They are really great instructional videos. And given that we know that our students or test takers are going to be looking at their score report, I will see them on a bus for some reason, and they're listening to a video, this could be just a really easy way for them to access these videos and get that information right away. Finally, score your response. This is where that lost opportunity of perhaps having the scoring tool in this last drop-down, where an ABE student could give it to their teacher, and then the teacher could score their response right there with the scoring tool. Or I'm not too sure. This is why this is the first prototype, and I'm just sharing it with you. But something to have the ability to score your response right there, I think would be advantageous. But what we have learned through this journey that I'm sharing with you here is that what we always think is right in terms like this, we want to go out and test that as well, because, well, you know, I'm a test development manager. I like testing. What can I say? And so this is preliminary, and just wanted to show you what we're working on and where we're at with the score report. But the RLA is a very exciting new change that's coming down the pike. And with that, I'm done. Any questions that we have?
So, Anne, I'd like to thank you for an incredibly informative discussion of the changes ahead. And I guess I would like to take, while people are thinking about their questions, and I'm going to ask Susan to join me in asking you a couple of questions. What was, in all of this research, what was the biggest surprise as you interacted with students about the writing task? What was the biggest surprise to you and the research team?
There's many. I
you can tell us
first off. I think I'll give you 3. First off was how they approach the test. By that, I mean they look and I'm talking now on the current version, not on the new version, on the current version, the task would open up in section 2 on the test, well, with the GED Ready on the last section, and they would not look at the prompt. They would look at the box, they wouldn't look at the prompt, and then they would go straight to reading the passages. In fact, there were so many people who did that and never went and looked at the prompt that I was starting to ask them, did you look at what this says over here? And they're like, oh, no, I didn't see that. I was like, okay. And now we're talking ABE students and non-ABE students. I'm not talking only one. So they went straight to reading, and then they would get to basically page 2, and then they just start writing. I saw very, very different approaches, but it was never planning. It was never like, okay, let me see here. Not even get out the note boards, but plan within the box or something they're writing. There was no thought. It was just get it done. And there wasn't a lot of time taken to think it through. As I said before, the get it done, it talks to not wanting to open the answer guidelines, not knowing what that highlighter is for. The approach was different than I had expected to see.
Okay, what was your second aha?
Well, I guess it was their lack of not wanting to touch anything on the screen. And then another aha, I guess, was we tested out putting a little pop-up at the end when they finished that said, did you proofread? Don't forget to proofread. And they had to click yes or no, just like what we have on the test as is, where if they don't scroll, they have to click, okay, I have to scroll all the way down. We would ask them when they said no, they don't want to proofread, we'd ask them why, and they're like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to proofread.
You know, and
those are students.
And this is Susan, and as I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking in my teacher role, I think many of the people who are out there are, with us today, that they're probably going, yeah, I recognize that student.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I recognize that student. And not just from writing, but the students who don't want to read any kind of directions. The people who go right in and they start reading a text, starting with the first word and moving through there, not having a clue as to what the purpose of that text is, or kind of what we as effective readers do, which, we get an idea so we can activate that background knowledge. But
so
also,
Susan, that's exactly why we put the instructions where we put them now.
And I think that is such a wise move in order to do that, because as much as we have through different PD tried to make sure that was something that teachers were saying to students, okay, now first thing you do is unpack the prompt. You got to read the directions, unpack the prompt. The reality is we do know there are so many students who are out there who are test takers, but they don't come to a class. And so, so we lose out on that entire group as we're going through. And so, I think that, quite a few of the things that you're talking about, just should remind us as teachers that, yes, we need to get students in that habit of even spending 2 to 3 minutes proofreading. And I understand students saying, oh, but I don't really need to. This is fine. And you go, no, this is not fine as far as that goes. So I really, I think for everyone out there, it is helping reinforce some of the things that they're doing in the classroom, and maybe going back and re-emphasizing once again as they're going through. But I do want to ask you a question, and this actually comes from one of our attendees today. And so the question really is, is there any consideration to extend the length beyond 45 minutes since the clear instructions in the larger box led to richer 500 to 600 words? She goes on to say, I was told at the conference that it was believed extended time wasn't necessary since most test takers weren't utilizing all of the time. Based on my student feedback for years and what you found in your study, I believe this was a result of vague instructions in the small box. So is there any consideration at this point to think about extended beyond the 45 minutes?
There is no consideration, but that is an excellent question about the how much time did I see people were taking to finish the test in the first pilot study as opposed to the next one where we increased the box size. And I'll tell you, in the initial one that we went out, they were writing for 19 to 21 minutes. And then in the next iteration, they were writing up to 40 minutes.
Okay.
And that's what we really wanted them to do, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the time.
And if we think about the fact that if we have students who are writing longer, but they're also doing some of the things that you talked about earlier about having, doing the planning, using those note boards, doing that kind of thing, then we should see that 40 minutes producing more and more quality writing as we go through.
That's what our aim was.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, but I do have a couple of other little ones. Well, first of all, to say to you that people are responding from the audience that these are excellent changes, and you know they're so thankful that these things are going to be happening. They do have a question though. Will this be available? The new boxes and new instructions for the GED Ready for RLA?
Yes, this change is going to occur to both the GED Ready as well as the GED test.
Okay. And we do have the question that comes up quite often about any chance the Ready can also score the extended response.
Not at this time. That's why I wasn't going to mention it here, but I did mention it at the conference that we are working on creating an automated scoring tool that will hopefully make the scoring much easier, much directed, and much more focused with a number at the end with feedback as well. And we're working on that right now.
Okay, so that would would that be something, again, that it would be automated so they would have that in the future? Or
they would have, the educators will still have to read the response of their students, and using this tool, it would just be not a PDF as it is right now with all of this multiply by 12 business. It would all be contained within one electronic tool.
Oh, fantastic, because then that way I know that our tool that we have now currently for scoring, the GED Ready, it's a little cumbersome, but I also know that from a standpoint of being, having gone through and worked with it quite a bit, that you really do learn the rubric by using that scoring tool. So even if we could have something where you check, this is this, and check things off, and then it does the calculations for you.
Yes,
that would be a great feature to have in the future.
But I'm also building in a printable feedback as a report that you can give to your students. We're working on it right now.
Fantastic. Well, it won't be long, and we'll have you back in here talking about all of those things here as well. I wonder if it would be possible, because we have several questions that have come in, if it would be possible for you to pull up the GED.com site, because people have asked, where do I find some of these things?
That's a great point, Susan.
So we have people who would like to know where they can find the actual sorry, I'm just drawing a blank on this one. The tutorial, those types of things.
Yeah, so with the new web redesign, I admit I am not so fancy foot and free going through this, but I know we start at the beginning, educators and administrators.
Correct.
And then we go down to teaching the GED test. And here you can see in the free classroom materials, looking for tutorials, reference sheets, scoring tools, and videos. And then here, under teaching resources, you'll find the high impact indicators and the AGE. So to answer your question about tutorials, let me click on more here. Yep. And both languages come up and the calculator tutorial. And then the preview of the test, the free practice test. Let me say again, we are not changing the RLA ER on the free practice test. It's just going to stay as it is. The GED ready.
And that intent for that one though is to really give students just a little preview. So it's not, I mean, it's serious, especially it's not like having that half length that we do with the other. So that's very good.
And then here are the study guides, and then the reference sheets, and here are the scoring tools. They're here and they're also in a different place. This extended response videos are the ones that I was referring to in the prototype. These 8 videos were created after I created my little 3-minute one. With publishers, we went and we created this series. So it's all based on the research as well.
Okay, and could you go back into where the tutorials are and just open up so they can see what one looks like?
So the tutorial is aimed at familiarizing the student or test taker with what they're going to see on test day. So it's quirky, the actual way that this works. It does not work like Word documents or anything like that. So point in fact, let me just go on. Like there could be horizontal scrolling, but if you click next and you haven't seen everything that you scroll to, this is going to come up. And if this pop-up comes up on test day, it makes people go, oh, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? But if they know that this unseen content is just going to happen if you didn't scroll down, then you're more prepared. The tutorial is aimed at trying to take away all of those on-screen obstacles that should not come into play when we're trying to test the content, not test your ability to click a tab or click a pop-up.
So one thing I would say to everyone who's out there is that we have not, I think many times that the tutorials are something that they're the least used tool, but they can be the most effective. And so, they could have a lot of impact for our students who are out there. So I really think that it would be such a wise thing if you can do this. Now, can they also download, or is it just view only?
It's view only, because it's meant to almost mimic what you're going to see on test day. So, but it's not downloadable, to answer your question. That would be, but we did not do that. I want to show you the highlighter tool.
Sure.
Because
fantastic.
this is something that really is useful for test takers, but if you don't know how to use it, it's very confusing because it's not intuitive whatsoever. So in these instructions right here, we built in the way that you're supposed to do it. So the highlight button will be on the blue text toolbar above the question. You have to select the words first, and then you click on there, and then you click here, and then you see a color change. Ordinarily, we do it the other way around. We click green, and then we highlight. But that doesn't work.
Okay.
So it's these little things that happen that you can really help your students know, even using the navigator. It's on every single test, and they can get around using the navigator. And here, you can't open this box like you would with the usual Word document. You can only open it down here. And that one's not.
And I think you're making an excellent point that, which I want to just take a second to underscore. And also, we have a ton of questions out there that we need to get to. But the fact is that these tutorials can minimize the stress of test day and surprises, because we all know that when test takers are surprised, that, you know, any strategy that you laid in carefully with them goes out the window. And that's why these tutorials, we created them to minimize surprises on test day. And even when students want to tell you, I don't need that, please make sure, I think Anne is illustrating this beautifully, please make sure they put their eyes on this so that they are prepared on test day, not just from a content perspective, but also how they need to interact productively with the interface. We have a lot of questions out there. Yes, there is. Somebody has. Natalia asked, "Will we get a copy of the slides?" There is a. Yes, you will. The handouts should be able to be downloaded from the site. If not, when the recording goes out, we'll make sure that you get a PDF of the slides.
The other thing, and while we're here, Daphne, because you bring up a really good point, Anne, if you don't mind, could you click on professional development over in that left hand?
I was just thinking that.
Great minds think alike. So you'll notice that on the professional development, you see where it says webinar trainings. And
right.
If Anne will click on that for us, this is where you will find information on the different webinars, and you see how, as she goes through, you can see the different titles that are there. You can watch it. You can download the presentation. You can download the workbook. You can download a certificate. So all of those different things are there. And it usually takes, like, until about Monday or something like that for them to be posted?
That's about right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was one question we had. Hold on, I'm trying to look at the.
These webinars are great.
Anne, okay. Could you tell us, because this is an issue that comes through. We have. First of all, we know that a student can earn 6 points on the extended response, but that number is doubled because it's a weighted item, correct?
Correct.
So they get 12 points. Mm-hmm. I think many people who are out there are trying to equate the 12 points with being 20% of the test, and then that means we've got X number of items remaining. So how does that 12 points become 20%?
Through the equating. I'm not the psychometrics person on this, but it is about 20%. And so we really try to push and motivate everyone to try and get the most they can on the RLA. So 20% doesn't seem like a lot, but why would you not try to get the 20% or so?
Actually, Daphne and I'll be the first to tell everyone that, please, don't tell students just to skip this, because writing is so important, not just for the student who is sitting there in your classroom, but it's for what comes after. It's for the person who's moving into a job, or the person who maybe wants to go on to technical training or even go on to college, how important those things are. So, and if you can earn 1 point, that means you get 2. So let's make sure that our students are doing that, because that is so incredibly important. One other thing, and then I'll say,
Susan, I want to agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
I want to agree with Susan so much, because just think about, if everyone can just think about, we just spent 3 years of researching this prompt and changing this to better it and to see the effects. So we think that this is a very important skill. And so that's why don't let 20% possibilities go away, because your test taker students are going to use it in their life eventually, if they go to school, or just how they think, thinking critically.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of those things that we would not say to a student, okay, when you get over to the math test, just if it's got 40 questions, just take 20% of those out of there. We would not ever say something like that. Just skip 20% of those questions, because we want students to earn as many points as possible. But yet we will say that when it comes to the writing. And so kind of keep that in mind as you're going through. But on those resources, and that we looked at just a few minutes ago, the tutorials and those types of things, are there offline resources available for those who are like in the prisons, so that they actually have access to the different tutorials that they can have?
There is an offline tutorial.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You just have to ask operations for it, and they'll give it to you.
Okay. Wonderful. Daphne, I'll let you take on the questions.
I wanted to also say something to the audience, that there are, which we haven't really dwelled on, but there are 2 kinds of score points. There are what we call raw score points, which is pretty much 1 item, 1 point. But then there are scaled score points, which is what you actually see on the score report. What happens between the raw score points, earning those, and what appears on the score report? There is an algorithm that reweights the questions. So please, I'm begging you, do not try to figure out mathematically, because you can't, and because those algorithms are proprietary for every single major testing program. Okay, so you cannot, just by knowing how many questions, you cannot extrapolate a score from that. And I want to dissuade people from trying to do that. And I want to emphasize something that both Susan and Ann said. The idea is to have students go in and perform at their best, not to decide we'll only need to answer 25 questions and I'm going to pass. We really want them to optimize. And to the point Susan was making about writing, it is the single most important differentiator in terms of people's lifetime career success. Employers, post-secondary, all are looking for folks who can write well. It is well worth your time and students' time to learn how to do that. So I want to make sure I, actually hit that one pretty hard. Students don't think that it's important to write well. It is. It actually makes you it gives you a distinct advantage, whether you're going to the job market or you're going on to college. So encourage students to spend the time to learn how to do this well. And as Susan will tell you, it begins with getting them to be better readers. That's where the better writers come from.
Absolutely. There is one. We have a comment that came in from Amy, and her comment is about GED ready, and it sets that range. And you were talking about, where they're likely to pass or, not ready, that type of thing. And her comment is that she really wants her students to acquire more for a buffer when she's having students determine whether or not they're ready for testing. So even though it sets at that 145, she really feels like it needs to be a little higher. And Amy, I'm going to tell you that I absolutely agree with you, because a student can, first of all, we know GED Ready is a half-length test. And if a student gets into the full-length testing and, they're a little more nervous, they maybe didn't have as good a day, and they drop off any points, then they're going to have problems. And so I have always felt that we wanted to make sure we had a buffer for students. And so thank you very much for bringing that up in your comments. It's something for all of you to think about in terms of, as we're getting students and recommending to them that, hey, it's time for you to sign up for that operational test, that we make sure we've given them just a little buffer. I think they'll feel better, and I know we will too.
I would actually take a bit of a different approach to that in terms of, if you want to build in a little bit of a buffer, but our GED Ready is actually built in predictive validity to the GED test, which means that we can actually predict how they're going to do, and likely to pass is the reflection of that. And about 72% we can say with assuredness that they're going to pass the actual GED test. Building in a buffer is always great, but then I'd also like to add, maybe try to focus them on not just passing then. If you're going to build in a buffer, teach them to reach for a bit greater than that, so that they could actually strive for a little bit more.
That's a really good idea, because the more we get to push them and to get those higher scores, I think is great. I think I'm kind of like Amy, is that I'm worried about that 28% that as we're sitting there, because I've seen those students in the past, and who that half length, they do real well, and then and as reliable and the validity level of this test is just, it's spot on. But that's one of those things. And no matter what you're doing out there, we don't want students at the minimum. We want students to be scoring higher, and for us to be seeing over time that we're getting more students up to the college and career ready. Because I think that's where we want to go with so many of the people that we have there. So good point. Thank you, Ann.
And what's true too is you never know what happens to your students on test day.
That's right.
So whether they do so well in the classroom and the GED Ready, when they go into that testing center and they have to test, you don't know what's happening to them. And that's why, just getting back to the tutorial and the free practice test, and the more they're familiar with these weird constraints that they may see on testing day that appears on the screen, we really want to have their skill set, their tool belt. I want it to be full with all of these options, that they're very comfortable with whatever's thrown at them, that they don't have that fear on test day and something happens and they have to put their hand up. And you just never know what happens in the testing center and how they feel. We want to relieve as much of that as possible. So preparing them with all these basic ones, no high stakes, is one of the ways to best do that.
Well, the other thing, Ann, is to understand that, and I love the fact that you gave this audience some insight into the predictive validity. Often, and actually at the conference, I did 2 sessions on mining score reports for instructional insight. And the truth is, and I had our folks in Tech Ops pull a sample of score reports, and we looked at people who scored too close to call, and then went on to operationally test. And in service to what Ann shared with you about the predictive validity, most of the time, someone who scored a 138 on the GED Ready scored in that general vicinity when they took the operational test. And so there's and on top of it, when I compared the areas for improvement, it was a virtually identical list, which is not surprising given the fact that the READY is normed and standardized in the same way the operational test. It's different, obviously, in length. So those score reports that you get from GED Ready are a gold mine of information. And even in their current form, where they tend to be maybe a tad overwhelming, especially if a student has a number of areas that need to be addressed, do use them because they do provide you with a useful window on understanding where your students are with certain skills.
And just to add to that, I just want to put out there that I hope everybody knows that the test questions on GED Ready are not made specifically for GED Ready. When we create test questions, we create, let's call it a batch, and all of these test questions are made equal. And then they're all field tested equally. And then the data for what we need to build the different tests, we use from the same batch. So these are real test questions that could have gone on a GED test, but we just chose to put them on a Ready. So it's the actual real test questions.
That is an excellent point.
We have just a couple of other things that I want to try for us to get to in terms of some of the questions. Anne, will there be any other changes that are coming in 2019? That's one of the questions from based on all the information they heard from you today. That they said, with the writing, that's one thing. But are you seeing anything big out there on the horizon?
Not to make to the test, no. We don't have anything on the books, no more research on the test. I mean, I know you're all saying, okay, social studies gone, ER, science gone, so short answers. Now we're changing the writing. No, nothing big on the horizon except this, and this is a positive change too, like all the other things, but no, nothing else is changing to the test.
And would you just tell people again when this is likely to be implemented, because a couple of people came in a little bit late and did not hear when we expected to implement the screen changes for RLA?
Every GED test and every GED Ready for RLA will be showing the new format on the test come January 2019 in both English and Spanish.
Thank you.
And we do have a few questions in terms of just a couple little items and content. And one of those is asking about some of the grammar. For those of you who might be new to GED, and I know we've had a couple of people who came in today and they said this is their first webinar. One thing you should be very aware of is the scoring rubric for the writing, so that you understand those three different components on which the score is based. And that third one, the third trait, actually does include some issues related to grammar. So I would really recommend that you take a look at, take a little bit of time to go back and review those rubrics. And as Anne was talking about, when they have a new score report, a new scoring tool, which will be fantastic. But even now, take a look at the existing scoring tool, because that can make a difference as you're working through these different things.
Well, and another
piece of advice is that if you're going to teach grammar, please teach it within the context of writing. Because what we have seen is that if you use worksheets and drills, people think that the rules of grammar apply over there and not to the writing task. So, the research shows the most effective teaching of grammar happens within the context of teaching writing. So, if you want to get the best results, you connect the dots for students and instead of allowing them to disassociate these two things as if they are two completely separate kind of process.
And not associated with teaching the grammar, but I one part that I did witness a lot of in the RLA research, specifically at the beginning, was the amount of copy and pasting from the passages in the people's work, in the students' work. We would say up to 90%. They can't copy and paste because I did not allow that feature in the test, but they are just looking over at the passage and then writing word for word and not using quotations properly and things like that. So 90% of it was just copied over, and we need to have them writing in their own words. And also dispelling a lot of problems. We don't score spelling. So if they can try and cobble together a word that looks like what they're trying to say, then that's good, because we consider it draft writing. It's only 45 minutes long. So focus on the grammar and check their spelling, but a lot of people got hung up on trying to make sure every word was spelt correctly and wasted time as well.
Well, and I think if memory serves me right, some of the things that you run into are homonyms, where it's students who are using two, and two, and they don't know how to use those words correctly. Or, those
and that
are
is
the
scored.
That is scored, and so you need to keep that in mind. That's why I would really recommend go in to pull the scoring rubric, look at trait 3, and you'll see a list about subject-verb agreement, parallel structure. There are a number of different things that are included within there. One other question, and I'm assuming that the answer is yes, we have a question from Mary who says, is there an extended time option for students with disabilities?
Correct, there is, for sure.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, so it's the same situation. When a student has documented disabilities and has been approved for these types of things, those appear on this test as well. And then from Drew Robertson, says, after the student takes a GED Ready test, when we check on the, quote, how can I improve my score, we're only getting sections in reading to study. Are we doing something wrong?
On the score report, when you click how can I score higher, and you're only getting through the 3 traits, you're only seeing reading as the first one, and that's across the board for all students. I don't know if you can answer that question.
Well, I can't answer that. Drew would have to actually type something in for us within that one, but I'm assuming that he's talking about, with the RLA, the first thing you're seeing is the reading, but they're not getting anything else except the sections in reading to study.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
You need a little bit more context on that for that question, I think, to answer it effectively. And if you can email, if Drew, you can email us so that we could get your question answered.
I think we have the answer here, because Stephanie has come in and she says, I see what Drew mentioned as well. We have assumed it is because the extended response is not scored on the GED Ready.
Oh. That is correct, because the expectation is that the educators would score that. So if they're saying that what they see is the passage, i.e. the stimulus material and the prompt, that's probably, well, aside from the student response, that probably would be all they would see.
Okay, so Anne has pulled over to the actual site itself. So Anne, you want to?
So you're supposed to be seeing, if everyone's correct, this is the GED Ready. You're supposed to be seeing these 2 tabs plus my written answers. And don't look at my answers, because I just test this. Okay, look how bad I write. I write so horrible. But yeah, you're supposed to see your student's written answer here.
Nice.
And then currently what these descriptions for the traits are.
Okay.
This is how you are supposed to see it. I don't know about what reading means.
Okay, can we go over to how I can score higher?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then within this one, you see that the student identifying and creating arguments. So that is actually, you can see where they need to identify details, but that is on the RLA, that is related back to reading itself. So in this particular case, where you have scored at 160, it's honing in specifically on those. So, but it would also, would it not carry some of the language arts pieces?
Traditionally, I usually fail so that I can see more of these these indicators come out. But these identifying and creating arguments are part of our reporting categories, and there's 3 others that, because I scored so high, they're not showing up here. But
okay,
this is about everything but their extended response. Is that, I don't want to just say reading, but I guess I know what you meant by reading. If I'm talking about the GED Ready for RLA, what we're looking at here, how I can score higher, is pertaining to the first part of GED Ready. And if it's the GED test for RLA, how I can score higher is pertaining to the first and last section of the GED RLA test.
Okay.
My written answers is only my extended response and using that rubric of the 3 traits.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you. And I'm hoping for Drew and for Stephanie that this helps a little bit in terms of the questions that you were asking.
I try usually fail so that I could see more indicators. If it's math, there's no problem.
Well, Drew's comment came back with the fact that, yes, that's right, but aren't there writing multiple choice items within that first part? And his comment may be that it might be a matter of the study materials they have.
I think it's a matter of your study materials. What I'm hearing is a short answer, which we used to have in the science, that perhaps your study materials are showing that you're going to have to do much lengthier than a fill in the blank, but yet not as long as a constructed response. And that's why that tutorial is so important, because we don't have those kind of test questions on the test. If it's a fill in the blank, we may have one on RLA or so, but we don't usually do a lot of fill in the blanks.
Okay, let me see if we have a couple of others.
Well, I want to put my hand up. And if it's a fill in the blank, I got my hand up in the air. Hello.
Okay.
The fill in the blank will be only as long as the box is there. So if it's a short little box, then you know those are the characters that you need. And we usually use those for numbers, not words.
Correct. I think they were more interested in, when the part of the RLA test where they may have to edit a document and they have those drop-down menus, and
yes,
that maybe they're not seeing that that the person had difficulty with sentence structure or parallel structure or something like that.
Yeah, that would be intertwined within the how I can score higher for the grammar points. Because you have to also understand it's a skills-based test, so just because we test it in one vehicle doesn't mean it's not tested across the whole test as well, and then we report out into a category. That might have been confusing.
And I just wanted to, the person who asked about the extended time for the GED Ready, there are a couple of things that you should know about that. One is that the student involved or the educator working with the student needs to indicate when the account is set up that the person will be requesting accommodations. For the GED Ready, you don't extended time. You don't have to have gone through the entire accommodations process. But the fact that you are going to ask for accommodated testing for the operational exam, you should indicate that in the student account. And in order to access the extended time, it is not available. It is not available, for purchase. You have to call the call center to schedule its delivery. Okay, so it cannot just be ordered in the online world. It has to actually be scheduled through the call center. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that point clear.
Thank you. Definitely, I wanted to say that too, because I also, on my screen right now, I'm showing you through the tutorial that on every screen that any test taker is going to see, including the GED Ready, that they can see and choose a different color scheme and do their own custom fonts. Because even though we know that people need to have an accommodation, some of us out there don't know that we need an accommodation, and we can play around with these color schemes and everything is a lot clearer. Again, this is all about putting down those obstacles in front of our test takers and letting them be aware of what can make a more comfortable situation in a testing center for them. So if this is what they need to do, they can change their font size right there.
We do have one question, or a question that has popped up a couple of different times. And I think part of this comes from a concern that students have said to their teachers that, they feel as if they don't have time to read all those instructions. So the question is, does the test timer stop if they're reading instructions?
No, no, it does not. Test management, time management is very important. I agree with this person, and I feel sorry when I see people feel like they are so rushed that they're not reading the instructions. But time management and learning how to manage your time in a test is a strategy. It is part of that. So unfortunately not. But we do have some students, test takers, who don't feel comfortable with watching the time tick down. So here you can see that you can actually close the time and not see it. I don't know if that's also another strategy that people have said, but time management is very important.
Well, the other thing is on the instructional side, we have advised in the many workshops that we've done on RLA and strategies that you can use in the classroom. Obviously, you can't open up, trying to have students do everything if you are trying to begin to try to help them be more effective writers. So you may start with untimed and shorter chunks of writing, but as your time with them proceeds, you can ask more, so they'll write more, and you can, in the closing weeks of your program, you can institute timed writing so that to Ann's point, students get used to the idea that they're going to manage that. Ann talked about, the amount of time that they saw students take to tackle this task being between 19 and 21 minutes. One of the last statistics I saw from assessment services was that on average, students use 25 of the 45 minutes. And so that would indicate that there's lots of room for you to spend at least some part of your instructional time with them, helping them to understand how to strategically break down that 45 minutes to optimize their writing. And it begins really with a plan. It also begins with your having the instructions that Ann shared posted somewhere so that students are not seeing them for the first time when they show up for RLA. So there are lots of things that you as instructors can do with students to help them be better prepared for tackling this task.
And if I could very quickly, if we'll go back under educators one more time and go under
Susan, we're on the same page.
and go under P and if you will go back to PD for me. And under the webinar trainings, because we've had quite a few comments and concerns, and I won't go through each one of them because we are out of time, but I wanted you to notice that in the past webinars that we've done, we have one that says what students need to know, GED RLA's extended response. That is one that you may want to really take a look at. And then if we scroll down a little bit further, and I'll have to see if it's in this group. Actually, if you go to watch more, all of these are also included over here for on YouTube. And so we're going to scroll down a little bit, and there should be one that's a part 1 and part 2 for there it is, for thinking strategies for crafting constructed response. There is a part 1, there is a part 2. People have asked about, what do we recommend for organizers for dealing with the grammar, all of those different things, and you'll find that both of those are excellent resources for you. So having said that, Daphne, I'll turn it back to you and Ann.
Okay. Well, Ann, I really want to thank you with being with us this afternoon, and I want to thank everybody who came to the webinar, and the vast majority of you stuck with us all the way through. So I want to thank you for making the time, because I know that you have very busy schedules. And we hope that you will access the webinar archive. There's a ton of materials, as Ann showed you. The handouts, workbooks, all are included underneath those links, so do access them. Ann, any closing words for our intrepid teachers who joined us this afternoon?
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm happy that we can report out on some positive outcomes from the research. And I know you all are doing an awesome job out there, and I just hope that this adjustment will only make your lives a lot easier and help our students as well. So thank you.
So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Ann. And everybody, if this is the end of your day, have a great evening. If you are midway through your day, have a great day. And thanks.
Thank you.